I'm Rickey Jasper, and this is the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. After getting laid off 2 times in 6 months, I realized I had to be chasing a greater vision in my life. I had to be walking into my calling. I spent time building up a successful fitness apparel business, and then now stepping back in front of camera to talk, to speak more, to hopefully inspire you to chase a greater vision in your life. And my goal with this podcast is for us to do it together, so let's make it happen. Welcome back to the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. I'm your host, Rickey Jasper. Today's episode, we're going to talk about resilience. Why? Because in things that we go through, we have to be resilient. This is going to be 3 tips to unleash your resilience. This is going to be 3 tips to really be able to put pressure on whatever's pressuring you. I like thinking of that because we're reactionary in a lot of things that happen, right? But we don't put pressure on those things. We don't put pressure on, our hopes, our dreams. We don't put pressure on the things that are nagging us to really be able to come out on the other side and be better and do better. So we're going to step through that today. So our first segment is our head and heart tips. This is something that hit me in the head, made me think logically, and something that hit me in the heart, made me feel a certain way. We also have an author today. We are hitting on all cylinders these weeks. Like usually we don't have an author, now we do. The quote is, "Between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom." Man, logically, that hit in so many different ways because, between stimulus and response, there's freedom. We're getting stimulus from so many things that happen on a daily basis, on an hourly, minute, second by second basis. And when there is space there, there's always space there, But what you are able to do in that space is instead of react, you can respond. Reacting is impulsive. You react, there's no growth in that, there's no help in that. You typically react on a feelings level, and that doesn't help. Response is something thought through. So that's logically. From a feeling standpoint, last year in 2022, for me, it was when there's a stimulus hits, I'm reacting. My reactions were not the greatest at all. I really had to learn and really put pressure and learn how to be resilient when stimulus happened. I feel like I went through like a little bit of a mental shift in probably spring of last year that spanned through, I'd say maybe fall, winter time frame. Went to therapy, worked some things out, which was great, phenomenal. But I was able to learn really about myself, about the brain and all this other type of stuff. And I was really able to put these things in practice. So a lot of the thing was stimulus, space, response, instead of stimulus, react. So that's where, from a feeling standpoint, I feel that because I'm like, man, I went through that. I'll talk about it a little bit later. But we're going to get into it, how to be resilient and how to really take your power back. And these are going to be 3 powerful tips to unleash your resilience too. So first is notice how you want to respond. Notice how I didn't say how you want to react. How you want to do something and how you do something can be different. I want to be leaner and cut and be a better performing athlete and everything, but how I react when it's 9 o'clock and I've woken up from like my pre-bed nap when I've fallen asleep on the couch and I go to the fridge just to get some water and I see that there's Cheetos and I see that there's cookies, it's different. Sometimes I react and I'm like, a few Cheetos and a cookie won't hurt, right? But if you notice how you want to respond and you focus on that, what's going to happen is it's going to make you question your reaction. Now, how do you focus on your response? Is you notice the space between. So anytime there's a stimulus, anytime you feel something, there's always space. You can create it that, okay, I can make a different decision before I react. And then you can respond. David Goggins is in his latest book. He has something. It's like the 1 second decision, and he's like, you can make or break yourself in 1 second. So he really talks about, people who have addictions or anything like that, where it's like you might be 10 years sober, but then in 1 second you just react instead of taking time to respond. I really like that analogy because you might not be addicted to anything. You might not, really be going through anything, but you might be wanting to build a little bit better habits. You might want to be more resilient in certain areas of your life. And what you can do is realize, like, when that stimulus hits, you got 1 second. In that 1 second, there's space. And so with that 1 second, you can make a choice. And so you have the power to choose. So don't walk through and say, oh, I'm just victim to circumstance. I'm victim to this, victim to that. And there are some things that are outside of your control that you might be victim to. But more often than not, we tie a lot of things that we are in control to something that is, oh, it's because of something else. When we look at our habits, we look at what we're doing, and, we look at our reactions and we're like, oh, I'm just this way. You're not always just that way. Right? You can respond different ways, and the more that you respond in different ways, the better habits build, and the better habits build, the neurons really sync up. And I'm no scientist. Don't put me in a science book or anything like that. I'm talking about things that I've learned from people who are. But that habit starts to really lock in. And when that locks in, then your new reaction is going to be something towards positive, because that stimulus hits and you're going to react in a positive way. Like, I'm a morning person, or I say I'm a morning person because I've consistently woken up in the mornings and done the hardest part of my day, working out, doing my daily devotion, which is actually an easy part, but getting up is not always the easiest. My reaction now is the minute that alarm clock hits, I pop up. That's a reaction. That's a positive reaction for me. Over time, it was a response because I had to choose it. The alarm would go off. I'd be like, man, I really don't want to do this, but there's space. I can choose to go back to sleep, or I can wake up and I can get moving. And the more that I made that choice, then it became reactionary in a good way. So, it's not going to always be how you feel, because your reaction might push you in a different direction, but your response is who you want to be. So think of that. Number 2 is rolling right into it. Choose your response. But how I'm going to take this is different. So my dad and I used to play chess. He would always beat me. Because I would just go for, the easy moves to get pieces off the board. He'd be playing the long game. So if you're trying to be resilient, you have to think about the long game in the long game impact of what you're doing. And I'll go back to the morning, situation. I have to wake up early in the morning because I have a lot to do throughout my workday. I want to get the podcast done. I have pups. I have a fiance. I have a lot of stuff that require attention in other directions. So I need to have about 3 hours in the morning where I can just focus on the things that I need to focus on and put my life jacket on first, right? And so when I do that, I'm saying I'm making better choices so that the longevity of my relationship, the longevity of my health, the longevity of my career, the longevity of everything else can be there. But it's because I'm making that choice to choose a response. The other thing too is, I've used this analogy, but basketball, it's such a great, very easy thing. When you have the ball in basketball, you can shoot, you can pass, you can drive, right? But in order for you to do that effectively, you have to create space. There has to be space. If you don't create space, I used to play basketball in high school and collegiate level, and they would say, hey, create space between you and your defender. Space the floor. These things are important because when you space the floor, you're able to see things differently. You make better decisions. When you have space between you and your defender, you don't turn the ball over as easy. Also, when a defender's up on you, your heart rate starts to, rise, and then you make impulsive decisions that could not only impact you, but impact the team and impact the game. So you want to think of it like that. Oh, I have the ball, but I need to create space. When I create space between me and my defender, now I have 3 options. I don't just have one option, which could be to turn the ball over. I have 3 options to have a positive impact on the game, which could basically impact the outcome of the game and the whole trajectory of the season. You think of that down the line and how those things can impact you, you start to value the space that you create in these decisions. I talked about this as well, like in the previous point, but last year it was tough for Carly and I. I was so in my head about so many different things, and because I wasn't creating space to allow myself to respond in certain ways and in better ways, it was impacting our relationship, and it was impacting her, and it was impacting me because I was sitting back and I was creating worse habits because I would just consistently reinforce bad habits. She was feeling more and more discouraged and feeling hurt. And so where does that get better, right? If we keep doing the same things, then she feels worse. I feel worse. I'm not helping any situation. She doesn't know how to help. There's that, right? But in the space of it and being able to practice making better decisions, I help myself, I help my relationship, and now we're stepping forward in a positive way instead of moving back. So think of it like that. Number 3, embrace the pain of growth. I talk about this on other podcasts, but it's so important. You have to forego immediate gratification. This is a practice that is extremely, extremely beneficial. It can be fun to do as well from time to time because you know that you're getting better. Food and fitness, that's a big one for me. I'm like, well, if I want to perform better down the line, then right now I have to forego having cookies every single night. I really want to, but it's not going to bode well for me. It's not going to bode well for my performance. It's not going to bode well for my confidence because I'm not hitting my metrics. So embracing the pain of growth is an essential thing to being resilient. Resilience is typically because there's something that you have to be resilient against. And if you're resilient against something, that means that something that is exerting force on you doesn't always feel good, but you are embracing the pain of growth because you're getting stronger. I've used this analogy and I will consistently do it. When you get under a bench press and you do 135, the first time you do it, you're like, dang, that's tough. Then as you consistently do it, that ends up becoming a warm-up. It's extremely light. The weight didn't change. You became stronger because you embraced the pain of growth. You kept stepping through it. You kept working hard to get better at it. If you just lift 135 once a year, then every year it's going to be the same. If you consistently do it once a week, then after a year, you're like, oh, I can lift this with a hand. So resilience is really going to be how you're embracing the pain of growth, how you're also going after pain in certain areas. This is something that I don't know that's talked about a lot. Like, we talk about being reactionary when certain situations hit, then do this and go after the pain. No, sometimes you have to go after the pain. For me, I now really enjoy running, but because I enjoy running, now I'm like, well, I don't want to just run within my comfort or threshold. I'm like, I want to push outside of that. I want to see how far I can get to. When we do these podcasts, we shoot every other week and we shoot a few different ones. And I'm like, okay, I want to push myself. How many can we shoot in today? How prepared can I be? How much can I output while still having the energy to get through the rest of my day? Because I know that down the road, the chess match down the road is I want to travel, I want to speak, I want to do seminars, I want to get people together, I want to help people. And I know that that's going to be a few things. 1, a lot of work. 2, it's going to be a lot of energy output. 3, not everybody's going to like it. So some people are going to have some things to say. So I have to be resilient against the comments of this and that, whatever it is. Like those are things that because I'm getting the reps in now and I'm saying, hey, sometimes I got to put myself through the pain of whatever this is, even if I really enjoy doing it. That's why I said, like, I can love fitness and I enjoy putting myself through the pain of abstaining from eating junk food because it's part of the process. I love this. I can enjoy the pain of being like, okay, cool, we have a shoot day. I'm going to be here for a few hours just talking to a camera and just coming up with stuff off the top of my head based on my experiences and opening up and embracing that. That is going to make you a more resilient person. Go after some of the stuff. I'll be real. Like, stop just sitting down and playing video games and, just scrolling social media just to get out of your own head, to give yourself a break. That doesn't help you. That doesn't help anybody else. It doesn't help anybody around you. All it does is weaken you as a person because then you are just taking in so much, just taking in little dopamine hits that are so cheap that you aren't able to step through the things in your life that you really should, the hard things that give you true and lasting dopamine hits. Mason will tell you, Mason's behind this camera right now. After we do this podcast, I'm not like, oh, I'm drained. That was great. I'm like, I'm hyped up. I have the best days after because I did what I feel was a easy yet hard thing to do, to stay engaged, to talk, to do all these things. And I'm proud of myself and I'm excited. And I'm also excited because I'm like, because of this, hopefully somebody else benefits. When you embrace the pain, somebody else benefits by you being better. Last summer, Carly benefited by me being a better person. I benefited by me being my family benefited by me embracing the pain of doing the hard things to be a better person. Those things, and when you see areas in your life become better because of it, it's intoxicating. You're excited. It's just like when you start to lose the weight and you're like, oh man, I see 2 pounds drop. I can do this. Now, waking up the next day and doing the quote unquote painful thing doesn't seem as painful because you're like, I'm seeing the benefit of it. So to wrap it all up from a resilience standpoint, number one, notice how you want to respond. How you want to respond might not be how you feel like reacting, but stick in where you want to respond and do that over time and make that a habit. Number two, choose your response. You have the power to choose more often than not. You can choose to respond out of love and foresight, or you can choose to just react. It's your choice. You have that responsibility. However your life ends up from an outcome standpoint, some things within your control, you can't put it off as if somebody did something or they didn't want you to win or whatever, because you have to look at your choices. If you consistently made poor choices and you are consistently getting poor outcomes, what is it? Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. That's it. If you're playing stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes. Think of it like that. Number three, embrace the pain of growth. I went through this ad nauseum. Embrace it and go after it. Go after pain in areas that you want to be better. It's going to make you a better person. And for our last segment, the word of the day is easy. It's space. Create space. This is something that I have worked on so hard. I still work on it day to day. When I have tough days, when I just want to be reactionary, I have to create space. Now, that can come in the form of, okay, if I have to have a difficult conversation, that space may be, I need a night to sleep on it. For me, my spacing for any sort of handling something that I initially want to react to, I give myself 3 days. The reason being is because day one, I'm hot. I'm like, okay, I really want to have this conversation. I really want to tell this person off. I really want to blah, 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 which is what I used to do. Day two, you're kind of like, okay, it's really not that big of a deal. And the day three is a critical day. Because if day three, if it's still there, one, the emotion's out of it, and I'm like, okay, I can have this conversation, and the emotion's out of it, and it can be constructive. So I know that going into the conversation, hey, here's kind of what I need, and here's, where the conversation I think needs to be. But if it doesn't go that way, that's okay because the emotion's now out of it. Or day three is I completely forgot what was happening on day one. And if I forgot about it, then it's just not important. So create space, and that is going to help you be resilient, because if you're reacting to everything, you think about, Winks is my dog. I reference him a few different times, and he's an Australian Shepherd Border Collie mix. One I rescued. Love that dog. But it's funny because he's so stimulated in the sense, if you get him outside and off leash, he wants to chase everything. It's like he's running wind sprints. So if you're going after every stimulus, you're going to get tired. That's why you have to create the space, because you have to filter out what things are important to be resilient against and what things you really didn't need to spend the energy. So create space where you can. These are 3 tips on how to be resilient and unleash your resilience and be forthcoming about that. We don't want to walk through life and just walk through it softly. You want to be able to exert your force on things and to be resilient about certain things that are coming at you. So I hope that this podcast episode helps. If it does, share it with somebody else who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel. Click that button. Click all the buttons except the dislike button. But if you disliked it, you can click that button too. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all so much for watching the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. If you like this podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, send it to friends, use a carrier pigeon, do whatever you have to do. We hope that this inspires you to chase your greater vision in your life and for us to continually and consistently do it together.